This is Earth School Radio, exploring the lessons of being human, one conscious conversation at a time. Everyone's talking about New Earth, but what does that actually mean? In this episode of Earth School Radio, we explore where the idea comes from and how New Earth isn't about escaping to a perfect reality, but about how we show up right here when life is real and raw and unresolved. We'll talk about why old systems are cracking and what's trying to emerge through the chaos, and how awareness, choice, and intention quietly reshape your reality. So grab a coffee, take a breath, and let's talk about New Earth in a way that actually makes sense. Well, here we are, back again. All you Earth people, Earth humans. Anyway, how's everybody doing? It has been a very crazy couple of weeks. I live in an RV. I am traveling around with my young teenage girls and my husband. We're traveling around Florida all winter. We're from Ohio, and I rented out my house and said, "Hey, let's just live in an RV." And everyone thought I was nuts, but you know what? Here we are. And so we've been settling in for the last couple of weeks. And so I'm starting today just saying, man, it's been crazy. Everything on the planet is going berserk. We've got volcanoes erupting all over the place. We've got an unprecedented number of earthquakes all over the place. Japan just had a massive earthquake. I mean, there's earthquakes going on everywhere. Now we've got in Oregon, we've got flooding, Washington flooding, we've got flooding in, I can't remember the other state, but there's massive flooding. Maybe it was Tennessee. There's a lot of stuff going on. There is a lot of stuff going on. I watched this guy on YouTube called his name's Stephen Burns, and he has a YouTube channel where he analyzes all of the solar flares and the space weather, and he's even talks about like 3-Eye Atlas. And speaking of which, 3-Eye Atlas is making its closest I don't know what it's called, closest flyby of Earth today. It's closest that it will ever come to Earth. And I don't know if you've done any research on 3-Eye Atlas, what it is, where it's coming from, but if you listen to the mainstream media, you know that it's probably some kind of comet, and that's all. But if you're looking into the other layers of it, you can get some research, do some, watch a few YouTube videos, and just check in with yourself on how you're feeling about it, because it does not present as any kind of comet ever has. So my feeling about it is that it is some sort of higher intelligent celestial object that's coming into our solar system to bring this new frequency, this elevated, I don't know, maybe Christ consciousness to all of us, to the planets themselves, to the solar system itself. But then that also affects us. And so I think there's just all of this upheaval and all of this stuff that's happening everywhere. And it's really indicative of this change that's happening in our own bodies and on the planet. And that's why I felt like today, let's talk about New Earth. Let's talk about what is coming. What is this New Earth we're talking about? So I guess I just want to start with, where did the phrase New Earth come from? So let's just set the standard now. Where did it come from? The first place I remember hearing of New Earth was in the Bible, in Revelation, where they talk about, John has this vision, and he's talking about, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. And just to summarize it, me and my translation as a good little church girl, it just talks about how New Earth is this perfect restoration of our current world where we're free from sin and suffering, where basically everything from people to animals to all of nature live exactly as God intended it to be before the fall. And that's all I really want to say about that. Next, I want to talk about, for me personally, I latched on to the idea of New Earth. New Earth became a reality for me when I read the book, The Three Waves of Volunteers by Dolores Cannon. I talked about this in my first episode. She was a hypnotherapist. She's passed away now, but she developed a technique called QHHT, quantum healing hypnosis therapy. She developed a way to communicate by putting people into like a deep state of hypnosis, and then was able to kind of tap in, and people would start to recall past lives. And I mean, it got much deeper than that. At a certain point, she developed a way to actually communicate with her client's subconscious. She called it the SC, or the higher self, which really, the subconscious in every single human being, if you wanted to talk about what is the subconscious, it's like an infinite recording device that's been capturing every experience since the beginning of the soul's existence, across every lifetime, every experience, and records it all. And so during thousands of sessions with her clients, they would consistently describe this time of imminent planetary shift into what they called higher dimensional reality. And I read that book and it was very out of my periphery. So it was, or I don't know if that's the right word, but anyway, it was out of my realm of understanding at the time. But so what made it take hold? Why did I listen? Excuse me. Because the reason I listened is because clients from all over the world she was doing this hypnosis with, who had no prior connection to each other, were providing nearly identical details about the Earth's ascension from the third to the fifth dimension. Basically, the core of her teaching is that New Earth is a higher vibrational state of consciousness, a time of peace and unconditional love that humanity is collectively moving towards as the old Earth falls away. It absolutely fascinated me. If you get a chance to read any of her books, do it. I would say start with that one, The Three Waves of Volunteers and the New Earth. But I just want to pause here for a quick second and say right off the bat that I'm not professing to be some kind of expert on this. This here is just a conversation, me sharing my thoughts on what I'm intuitively guided to. And, also, this is what I do. For the last 5 years of my life, I have immersed myself in this kind of research and looking for answers to questions that I had. I have a very curious mind, so I dive deep. I have a researcher's brain too. So I really want to know what I'm talking about. I want to understand things. I want to look at things from multiple perspectives. But that being said, I'm not an expert. So this is just my take on things, and you can take what resonates, do your own research, and build your own understanding of what's going on. And then have a conversation with somebody about it. So, in the spirit of research, let's talk about something else. I wanted to know in my research what other cultures and religions might also say about this time. One in particular that's being talked about a lot because it is so profoundly aligned with current events is a Hopi prophecy. I'm not going to break it down in its entirety, but it is pretty in line with everything that's going on. If you want to research it and look it up and get all the more expanded details on it, I would look up the Hopi prophecy about the 5 worlds and the blue star Kachina with a K. Essentially, the Hopi believe that humanity has already lived through three previous worlds, and that all of those worlds ended due to corruption, being focused on the wrong things, not being connected to God, leading to them being destroyed by fire, ice, or flood. And they say with a fourth world, which is the one we're currently living in, they teach that there will be a transition from the current fourth world to a fifth world. And I think that it's pretty coincidental that they talk about a fifth world, and Dolores Cannon talks about this transition from third dimensional reality to fifth dimensional reality. And I thought that was an interesting correlation. But anyway, the Hopi, they talk about a new earth of harmony, not destruction, achieved by humanity choosing love, balance, and respect for nature over greed and technology. They say it's marked by a great spiritual awakening, recognizing that we belong to the earth, and that there's going to be a collective shift where we start to focus on all life and our connection to everything and everyone. Global upheavals will happen. They call it the Great Shaking, that will cleanse the old corrupt ways, and that it will be a time for uniting and healing, where humanity will face a choice between this awakening leading to everlasting life or continuing in the corrupt, destructive ways of greed and materialism. And I mean, that's pretty solid. Look around. Does it sound familiar? I think it does, you know? I think it does a lot. So this sets the stage for what is expected or foretold about New Earth. And now what I'd like to do is see if I can kind of piece together how it is showing up right now, you know? So to me, the time that we're in right now is a time of transition into higher states of consciousness. It's not just something I'm feeling intuitively. It's it's actual science. So I want to just kind of take a minute and just weave into this picture now of what is the science of New Earth. The Earth is changing, hence all the flooding and the volcanoes and the earthquakes. Everything that's happening, these changes are a part of the result of these solar flares that have continued to affect our Earth's frequency. Now we have this three-eye atlas visiting our solar system, and as it's coming in today, it's at its closest approach to the Earth, and it's sharing its frequencies with us. And to me, that's just enlightenment. It's just bringing enlightenment and benevolence and uplifting humanity, and kind of just flipping a switch, helping us to recognize something different. And it shows in the Schumann resonance. I don't know if you guys know what the Schumann resonance is, but the Earth itself, Earth herself has a resonant heartbeat, so to speak, a vibration. And it is measured in hertz, and the Earth's resonance is at 7.83, or it has been for a very long time. And it's the electromagnetic frequency of Earth. And it is fluctuating quite a bit with all of these solar flares and M class, X class, whatever's coming in. I just think it's fascinating. You want to know something else that I think is fascinating? Is the fact that Earth's base frequency, 7.83 hertz, matches the human brain's base frequency exactly. And the correlation of the two, Earth and humanity, would make sense to say that this human resonance is now showing all these huge spikes related to this solar activity. You can see it. I watch this guy, that guy Stefan Burns on YouTube. He talks about it all the time. Huge spikes. They show in the Schumann resonance. And guess what? I would look at it and I'd be like, I would look it up. If I'd be feeling weird one day, I'd be like, oh my God, there must be solar flares or whatever. And I would look it up. There's an app that you can get on called solarweather.com or something like that. And you can look it up and you can see if there's like all kinds of X flares, solar flares coming in. And then I would start to be like, oh my God, I have a massive headache this morning when I woke up. And it's because the Schumann resonance is off the chart. So, in fact, in this past October 2025, the Schumann resonance reached unprecedented levels with rare and extreme spikes. If you know what it looks like, it's kind of a chart that shows a wavelength. And it was like complete whiteout at times. And at 7.83 being the baseline, we were seeing spikes as high as 40 and 50 hertz. And now let's just say that if we as human beings are in sync with the Earth's resonant frequency and our actual own human frequency is tied to the Earth's, wouldn't it make sense that we would feel it in our bodies? Yeah, duh. It's obviously affecting our physical selves. So is this the nudge to that higher frequency that Dolores Cannon's teachings explain so clearly, that it's a time of frequency and vibrational change, and that you have to be in this frequency in order to be part of New Earth? Let's circle back for a minute and talk about that. Her clients would say they'd refer to this as a shift or Earth's humanity's ascension into the fifth dimension. And these huge spikes in the Schumann, for one, are a real tangible way to show through science that something is happening, that there is a shift. It's real. But also, these spikes are seen as light codes or energetic triggers that are catalysts to wake up human DNA and expand our intuition. And here's something else that I think is really interesting. Higher Schumann levels overlap with gamma brain waves. We have different brain waves. We have alpha, delta, gamma. Gamma brain waves are associated with peak mental performance, people that have massive spiritual epiphanies, and it's associated with universal consciousness. And that gamma brain waves are measured between 30 and 100 hertz. So if we're getting spikes up to 40 hertz on the Schumann, then it just makes sense that our bodies are also elevating. Our consciousness is elevating. Our mental capacity is elevating. And mainstream science doesn't really use the term ascension, but research in 2025 confirms that the human nervous system is sensitive to these fluctuations. And the thing is those ascension symptoms often do align with documented physiological responses to electromagnetic changes. How many times, like I said, have you said in the last year, I feel weird? I don't know. I just feel weird. You feel like something's going different in your body. One of the most common symptoms reported during these times of increased activity is changes in sleep and dreams. I would always have trouble falling asleep when we would have accelerated activity. I have trouble falling asleep anyway. And it makes sense. So, if you think of Earth as having, say, a natural hum of 7.83 hertz that matches our brain's dreaming state, which we were talking about different brain states. There's theta, alpha, gamma, delta. So our dreaming state is theta. And lately, these solar flares have been making that hum much louder and more erratic. And our brains tune into that louder signal, which pushes us into deeper or more frequent dreaming states. And at the same time, messing with our sleep hormone, melatonin, making these dreams feel incredibly real and vivid. So there really is no denying that Earth and humans are connected. The planets, the events in the solar system also affect us. As above, so below. So, really, I feel like this is just a shakeup. It's moving energy in and out of the earth and in and out of our own bodies. And here's the thing, you can't hold a high frequency charge in a dense container. Think of it like trying to run 5G software on a 1990s dial up modem. The hardware, the, the thing itself is going to just get hot and not work. And that heat is like the upheaval that we're seeing spiritually. This rising frequency acts like a pressure cooker. It's forcing density to the surface. Just like when you get a fever to burn off a virus, the earth uses earthquakes and storms and volcanic activity to release energy, release trauma. The earth has trauma too. From all the pollution, from all of the wars, from all of the ways that we've abused our beautiful earth, throwing crap in the rivers. I don't know if you've seen these videos of over in Indonesia, these rivers where they're just filled with nothing but plastic and garbage. And they've had, lately, I've seen where people go in and clean them up with these different events that they have. And is it Mr. Beast? I don't know if it's Mr. Beast, but he had that initiative to clean up the ocean, and they've collected so much trash and garbage from the oceans. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. This is the new stuff. It's releasing the trauma and the weight of centuries of imbalance. And the same with our bodies. We're composed of earth elements, minerals, and water, and our bodies are electric. There's electrical impulses, neural activity. We are vibrationally tethered to the earth, and when she vibrates faster, we have to keep up to stay in sync. And so in our bodies, we feel it. This density manifests as old trauma, suppressed emotions, or physical ailments that you've ignored for God knows how long. Maybe you've noticed how the people around you are suddenly facing all these long buried issues. All of a sudden, they're dealing with some of their childhood trauma. This is because the higher frequencies act like a spotlight. They illuminate everything that's out of alignment with 5D consciousness. If it is based in fear or shame or guilt or anything dense and dark like that, it becomes heavy and uncomfortable, and it forces us to deal with it. We're essentially being rewired to handle more light, which is information and energy. And so that's really why the chaos is necessary. From an ascension standpoint, you can't build the new earth on a cracked foundation. You just can't. Doesn't work that way. So all of this stuff that's happening, it's for a reason. It's bringing it up in order to be cleared so that we can move forward into a new age of enlightenment and love and creativity and all the good stuff. So look around. There's a lot of shit going on in the world. Global upheaval. So I'm going to say that all of what's happening is, let's consider it the demolition phase. These systems, these institutions? So the systems and the institutions and even personal relationships that were built on fear and greed are losing their resonant frequency. They are literally vibrating apart because they cannot hold the high frequency charge of the new earth. You ever see those? I remember Tom and Jerry cartoons where I think there was one where he I don't know if it was Tom and Jerry, but the opera singer that hits that high note and and it hits that high note and that shatters that glass. That's what's happening. It's what's happening around us. And it's hard not to notice. Everywhere you look right now, systems, that we were told were solid, our education system, our healthcare system, our government, our financial institutions, our media, they all feel strained and cracked open, exposed. I think everybody's asking themselves, what the actual you know what? Things that once felt normal, unquestionable, are suddenly being questioned. Things that we trusted are being revealed as untrustworthy or outright dishonest. But here is the part that I think we miss when we only look at this through fear. What we're witnessing isn't chaos for the sake of chaos, it's exposure. It's like when a house has, like when we moved out of our house a long time ago. We had our first house that we bought. We moved out, and before we moved out, there was paneling in the basement, and I had pulled the paneling back for some reason. I can't remember why, but I pulled the paneling back before we moved out, and all in behind it was mold and hidden mold in the walls. And my kids were always complaining of stuffy noses and allergy symptoms. And we just didn't know. And we didn't discover it because we hadn't pulled it back. But now, think about it. We're pulling back that paneling and we're seeing all the mold. And, if we hadn't have done that, we would have just thought everything was fine. You don't discover something until you look. And those systems, the healthcare, the government, the everything like that, that's breaking down, that's kind of being exposed for what it is, they weren't designed for where we're going. They were designed for where we were, keeping us under the thumb of the system, the man. And it's uncomfortable for a lot of people to wrap their brains around. But yeah, everything from our healthcare system, our politics, our education system isn't working. Our kids are being failed miserably. The media sucks. It seems like the only place we can get truth is from either social media like TikTok or YouTube. Our food, people say all the time, I don't even know what to eat anymore because our food is being hijacked by pesticides that mess with our DNA and cause cancer. Our water supply, let's talk about that. Why the hell is there fluoride in our water? Do you still believe the lie that they're telling us about fluoride and how good it is for us? Do a deep dive on that. What we've been taught about our own human history, where we come from. Do a deep dive on that. The list goes on and on. Those systems were built for control, hierarchy, scarcity, and compliance, not for consciousness or creativity or human wholeness. So when people ask, why does it feel like everything's falling apart? I don't think it's because humanity's failing. I think it's because we've outgrown the structures that we were living inside. And that's where the idea of the new earth comes in. It's not a magical place we escape to, but it's a new way of organizing life based on truth instead of fear, and connection instead of separation, and this inner authority instead of external control. The problem is, you can't build something new on top of systems that are rooted in fear. They have to be seen clearly first, and that is what brings us to the real fuel source behind all of this. Because when you look closely beneath the policies and the institutions and the power struggles and the wars and everything that's happened for millennia, what's been running the show for the longest? Fear. Fear. That's what's been running the show for a very, very long time. I saw a social media post scrolling one day a while back, and it said something like, if you could get rid of one thing on planet Earth, what would it be? And I just thought it was interesting to see people's answers. So I started looking. Of course, it's Donald Trump. I'd get rid of Donald Trump. I'd get rid of having to go to work. I'd get rid of war. Really good answers. When I thought about it, I instantly knew. I knew exactly what I would get rid of, and it's fear. I would get rid of fear. It's what keeps us repeating cycles over and over again. It's what kept us prisoner in this world, just living in survival mode, hoping to retire at 65 and collect Social Security. Fear is what makes sure that we work our tongues out and don't question authority and pay our taxes. Stay in fear, because when you're afraid, you can be controlled. And so, that brings us to now. How do we break out of that? How do we break out of being afraid all the time? And you might not even realize that you're in fear. So, how do we break out of this, and how do we move into awareness? Because that's really where it starts. It starts with just simple being aware. Aware of the old ways of living that we've been inside for so long that they started to feel normal. Recognizing patterns, seeing things clearly, seeing this scarcity mentality. Oh, I'm so afraid I'm not going to have enough. I'm so afraid to do this. I'm so of constant stress. Feeling that you're always behind, always catching up, one crisis away from falling apart. The awareness of a life where power feels like something outside of you, that you don't have the power to change anything, that you're a victim of your life. We've handed over our ability to decide for ourselves what's right for us. I mean, let me go into it. I'm a registered nurse. And there were many times where I was being pushed to do something I didn't want to do. I remember even before COVID, long before COVID, I was working on the floor and it was time for a flu shot. I was pregnant at the time, and I didn't want to do it. I just, for my own self, I said, no, I don't want to have anything injected into me. If I get the flu through, and I will develop natural immunity to it, I'm good with that. So I was, threatened and told, if you don't, you're going to have to wear a mask everywhere you go. And so I did that. Later on, several years later, COVID came along, and I was threatened with, you're going to lose your job if you don't do this. And that was a very serious time for me. And it's actually what led to my spiritual awakening, to be honest with you. I was forced into a situation where I had to make a choice. Are you going to bend over and take it? Or are you going to stand on your principles? And I stood on my principles. And whether you agree with it or not, that was my choice. And I recognized that I had the ability to choose that for myself, what I thought was safe for myself. And I lost my job over it. And then I discovered a whole different way of practicing healing through Reiki, energy healing. And it's what I do now. I open my own Reiki business. And right now I'm not doing it because we're traveling in the RV. And, that's another thing that I stepped out on faith. I just changed my whole freaking life. I just decided I was going to step out on faith and start doing things that fed my soul and stop living in fear. And when you think you can't, you can't. When you think you won't, you won't. And the opposite is true also. If you think that things will work out, they usually do. And if they don't, it's a lesson that you're supposed to learn, and you'll work yourself through it. It's not the end of the world. So, just recognizing that your ability to decide for yourself what's right for you has been given to your boss and your bank and your expectations. And most people are just trying to survive, and they don't question. They're not actually living, though. Let me paint a picture for you. Let's say, for example, you're unhappy in your job. Nothing dramatic is wrong. You just have this constant freaking tightness in your chest every Sunday night. You get this low-grade dread every morning, a sense that every time I go into this place, I just feel drained. You start thinking about leaving. You start imagining doing something else. What would I enjoy? What could I do? Maybe I'd work outside. Maybe I'd work with animals. Maybe I'd do something that would maybe even enable me to work remotely and travel. But then fear starts to speak quietly, whispers in your ear, disguised as practicality or logical thinking. Well, what if I can't find something better? What if I lose my health insurance? Well, yeah, what's my husband going to think when I tell him that? What if I fail? What if I can't pay my bills? And so instead of asking, what can I do today to open up to a new opportunity? Or how can I make that happen? Or how can I start working towards that? They just say, is it safe? And they stay. Not because it's right, not because it's aligned, but because fear frames the decision as responsible. From the outside, it looks like a logical choice. Most people would say, yeah, you're being responsible. That would be irresponsible to choose something else. Maybe it's not even a job. Maybe it's a relationship. But yeah, I mean, we always think we're doing the right thing, but really, we need to learn how to listen to our gut. When we follow that pattern of choosing safety or choosing the logical thing, from that perspective, it teaches the body to ignore its own signals. And over time, that fear doesn't just keep them in their job, it shapes how they live. They stop imagining alternatives. They stop trusting their intuition. They tell themselves, this is just how adulthood works. Nothing explodes or crashes, but life just stays small. And that is how fear operates most of the time. It's not panic or terror. It's this quiet voice that convinces us to settle for less aliveness in exchange for perceived security. And that's just one way that fear keeps us stuck. And for a long time, that way of existing worked, or at least it worked well enough to keep things moving. But something's shifting. Something has shifted. More and more people are starting to feel it in their bodies, in their nervous systems, in their exhaustion, in the quiet thought that keeps returning. This is not working anymore. Not because they've failed, but because they've outgrown it. That moment when somebody realizes that the way they've been living isn't sustainable, isn't aligned, isn't life-giving, it's soul-crushing. That is where New Earth actually begins. Because once you see that fear has been the fuel, you can't unsee it. You start to notice how fear shapes decisions, how it keeps people quiet. Nobody wants to speak up. Nobody wants to ruffle feathers, how it convinces us to accept things that don't feel right. Just like people who got the shot. I can't tell you how many people in my field of nursing took the vaccine because they were afraid to lose their job. That's bullcrap. They knew it didn't feel right, but they did it anyway. And I can't tell you how many people have told me, I wish I would have never done it, because now, look what's happening. We're seeing all these injuries and the fact that it just wasn't safe. And I knew it. My gut told me that. And I listened. Fear rewards compliance and punishes curiosity. And awareness changes the game. And that is where New Earth becomes practical, like in the sense that it really, really is how we change reality. It's the part people overcomplicate. Reality changes because people change how they show up. Listen to some Joe Dispenza. He'll change your whole world when he talks about how people just are conditioned to not question things and just keep doing the same status quo. What you focus on affects how you feel. How you feel affects how you act. How you act affects your relationships, your work, your kids, your community. That's how it changes. New Earth becomes, little by little, brick by brick. It shows up when people start speaking up, even gently, even a little bit. This change starts when people stop numbing themselves and start listening to what they're feeling instead of suppressing it. when they look for alternatives instead of assuming that there aren't any, when they start thinking outside the box. You know, I talked about how I live in an RV, and this literally happened not last year, but the year before. I just looked at my husband one day and I was like, you know what? We could get an RV and travel. Our kids homeschool right now, so we wouldn't have to take them out of school to do it. He works a full-time job, but we make it work because he also works for an airline and gets flight benefits. And so I had devised this whole plan, and I just told him, I said, look, we rent our house out. So we rented our house out and we bought an RV, and we are traveling. We committed to do it for 2 years, and we are living life. And he at first was like, that's insane. That's crazy. My kids, my older adult children, I told them about it. They were like, Mom, that's never going to work. What are you talking about? And I literally sat down, mapped it out, and I had it figured out how we were going to do it, how we were going to pay for it, how we were going to sustain ourselves. And one day he just came home and he said, okay, let's do it. And I said, let's do it. So, yeah, so we did. And we rented the house out. We moved our stuff out. We moved into the RV in October of 2024 and spent the winter in Florida last year and loved it so much. We're back again this year and we are hitting all the spots. And it was fantastic. And it was a great thing for my daughters and a great thing for my own nervous system and my own creativity. And I can't tell you how happy I am that I made that choice, but it was freaking scary. And I didn't know how it was going to work out. But when you believe something enough, you can figure it out, you know? And this is important to say gently to those people that are like, this is all too overwhelming. Nothing here is a judgment, simply an encouragement to see that we are on the verge of creating something powerful. And in order to do that, we have to take back our own inner authority. The idea of New Earth arrives when people begin to choose alignment over endurance and truth over comfort and say, what they think is safe, and intuition over this conditioned response. Trusting what you think. Systems will reorganize naturally without collapse, without war, without force. It looks like people questioning, people choosing, people realizing that they are allowed to think for themselves again. It can feel unsettling, but it's also how growth works. Old structures don't usually disappear gracefully. They shift, they adapt, or they make room for something more aligned. And whether we call it New Earth or not, it's happening. And this is kind of where the conversation shifts. Because once people start realizing that they're allowed to think for themselves again, they quit giving a shit about what people will think and just follow their heart and their gut. That sense of inner authority starts to come back online. And that's where New Earth stops being about tearing something down and starts being about choosing something different. We're talking about conscious creation, or what I like to call creatorship. Conscious creation, it's not about manifesting some perfect life, although you can, or it's not trying to control how everything turns out. It's simpler than that. Conscious creation is about remembering that we're not here only to cope, we're here to participate. That our energy, intentionally focused in an area, will yield results. What you put in, you get out. Most of us were taught how to get through life, how to be responsible, how to endure, especially things that don't really feel good, because that's just how it is. And very few of us were taught how to listen inward, how to notice what actually lights us up, and how to trust that that pull towards something feels more alive, and how to think that that's okay, how to imagine a different way of living without immediately shutting it down as unrealistic. And that quiet pull is your intuition. It's your gut feeling. It's not mystical or woo-woo. It's just information coming from somewhere deeper than fear. And when people start paying attention to that, even in small ways, things begin to shift. They make different choices. They ask different questions. They stop automatically saying yes to things that they freaking hate, that drain them. They start moving towards what feels more true. They stop accepting a life that they're really uncomfortable in. And let me tell you, imagination matters here too. Every life, every system, every structure, every world, everything that we've lived inside of started as someone's idea. Nothing new shows up in the world until somebody first let themselves imagine it. New Earth isn't built by waiting for permission or having it all figured out. It's built when people start living as if other options are possible, and then taking small, real, actionable steps in that direction. That's creatorship, not forcing and not escaping, just constantly choosing how we show up and with intention. And when enough people start doing that, the world doesn't collapse, it reorganizes. And I think that's beautiful. And I think that's what we're doing. And so as we start to kind of wrap up here, I've been working on a segment to the podcast to actually do what I'm talking about, to tap into imagination as a way to paint a picture of what New Earth will look like, what it looks like on our way there. Just like when you read a book that lights up your inner world, or you watch a movie that inspires you to take that leap of faith or whatever. I've created a segment called New Earth Visions. They're short stories narrated by a voice of the New Earth that I've created called Ilaria. And my hope with this project and this segment is to just inspire you with these stories, to let them plant seeds of what could be, and ultimately encourage you to take steps of your own to consciously create your world, our world. And so without further ado, buckle up. Here we go.
I am Ilaria, the voice of the new earth. Each vision shared here is a seed. A word is not just sound, it is form in motion. When spoken with care, it plants itself in the living field that holds us all. As the Elohim once sang the old world into being, so now we sing a new one. Not through power or command, but through remembrance, the gentle weaving of vision into vibration. Listen with your heart open. Let the stories take root in you. They will bloom in their own time, reflecting back a world shaped by wonder, kindness, and truth. This is New Earth Visions, where imagination becomes conscious creation and every breath is a beginning. The choice between loads. It started between laundry loads. Not during a grand awakening, not on a retreat, not under moonlight with crystals. Just a moment. In the hallway, holding a basket full of socks that no one seemed to ever pair. Her name is Maya. 2 kids. A husband doing his best. A house they loved, but barely held together, like everything else. She was always tired. Always calculating how to make dinner stretch, how to pay the bill before the water got shut off, how to hide the sadness from her kids when they asked for things she couldn't give. But on this Tuesday, something shifted. She was standing at the dryer when a quiet thought came. What if I am not waiting for the world to change? What if I'm the place where New Earth begins? It didn't make the money appear. It didn't fix the leaking sink. But it did something else. That night, instead of rushing through bedtime, she paused. She sat on the edge of her daughter's bed, and said, "Tell me the best thing that happened to you today." And when her daughter answered, Maya listened, not while folding laundry, not while replying to a work email, but fully. Something warm moved through the room. Not emotional, electrical, coherent. That was the first seed. The next week she stopped saying, "I'm broke." She started saying, "Money is moving. I am learning to hold more." Then came the post-it notes on the bathroom mirror. "This home is a temple. We are rebuilding, inside and out. Stillness is my superpower." One morning, she asked her husband, "What would life feel like if we weren't surviving?" And instead of complaining, they imagined. And every time they chose imagination over despair, the room shifted, not visibly, but vibrationally. They started lighting a candle before dinner, let music play in the mornings, fixed the faucet themselves, slowly, together. And on one especially ordinary Saturday, Maya sat on the porch with her coffee. No rush, no plan. And for a split second, she saw herself. Same porch, same sky. But the trees were taller, the air clearer, her body lighter, the house behind her fully repaired, not by money alone, but by momentum of love. It was her, from a future New Earth timeline. She smiled, nodded, then was gone. Not because she was imaginary, but because she had been created through small choices, sacred pauses, and the quiet power of a woman no longer waiting. The New Earth isn't something you reach one day. It's something you practice. One breath, one choice, one moment of staying open, right where your life already is.
All right. So, that was pretty cool, right? There you have it. My vision. It's just a little glimpse of a normal family. What it looks like to start changing the way you think, the way you act, the way you feel. I hope it inspires you to see how even small changes can bring a whole new world into being. And if today's conversation resonated with you, if Earth School Radio feels like a space that you want to keep coming back to, I'd love for you to follow the show, maybe leave a review, or share it with somebody that you think might need it right now. Those small acts of support for me really do matter. They help these conversations reach the people that they're meant to reach. So thanks for spending this time with me. Thanks for being open and being a part of this consciousness evolution. And remember, stay open, stay grounded, and keep your dial tuned to love. This is Earth School Radio.